Welcome to Digital Democracy on Tap. I'm Sarah Jane Crespo. We just heard from incumbent Ron Estes and his challenger Laura Lombard. To help us break it all down on our panel this evening, we have my colleague Tom Shine of KMUW, Michael Schwanke of KWCH Channel 12, and Mark McCormick, formerly of the Wichita Eagle and currently with the ACLU of Kansas. And if you would put questions and comments to us, we would love to ask your questions as well. You can also email us at info@kmuw.org. Now, guys, can you start off by telling me kind of just your overall impression from the candidates tonight?
I'll go ahead and start, just because I think I'm the oldest one here, so I'll start. I thought they both were a little nervous to kind of when they got going. I think their opening statements were a little choppy. I don't know that that's Ron Estes' great strength anyway, but I thought as the evening went on, the half hour went on, they got much more comfortable. They were very good. You only had 45 seconds to answer, so there had to be pretty quick. So I thought it got a lot better as we went on.
And I was just mentioning, Mark and I were just chatting before this began about how brief the debate was. Do you guys want to talk about kind of the impact of that as well? And Michael, I know you were about to give your impressions too, so maybe you want to roll.
Well, yeah, you know, just to continue what Tom was saying, I always try to explain to people who aren't familiar with, you know, coming into a TV studio. I think there is a level of nervousness just there. You walk in, of course, it's different now with COVID. Everything's divided by glass, and it can be intimidating. I think, you know, when you look at Ron Estes, for example, or both of them really, you know, I agree with Tom's assessment that maybe we started off a little choppy, but you got to get past those nerves. And it is very brief. In TV time, 30 minutes with just a short commercial is an eternity. But, you know, the candidates are always really surprised on how quickly that 30 minutes moves.
Oh, Mark, you're muted.
I'd be wearing a shirt that says you're muted, Mark. As I was sharing with you before, I just think that the format was interesting. And I think the time limit forces people to boil down their points of view and really concentrate them. This was the shortest debate I've ever seen, and yet it might be one of the most effective because it really does force people to talk about what their bedrock beliefs are. And that came through tonight.
How do you all think that they reacted to this sort of surprise opening question about President Trump's pivot on the COVID relief bill today?
Well, I thought it was interesting. Of course, we had to pivot very quickly this afternoon as it was not expected. And I if I remember right, Congressman Estes, I mean, the first thing he said was, I did not expect this. So I think, you know, a lot in Congress right now are trying to sort through what this means for them and their re-election bids. As we know, and we're doing a story tonight, how many people are so affected, and we're so affected here in aviation, and a lot of folks depending on this next round of stimulus. So I think you could tell by his answer, he's still trying to sort through exactly how to move forward with the decision today by the president.
It's hard to believe that won't be a talking point for all candidates at the federal level, Senate, certainly the representatives, as they go out and it's when they can meet constituents, and constituents say, hey, you know, I thought we were going to get a little bit more help. Business owners, I think we're really relying on that, and they continue to struggle. You know, businesses are still not operating, many of them aren't at very full capacity. So that'll be a difficult question to answer. And I think, like you said, Mike, I think Ron Estes, they're trying to still figure out what their answer is to that.
Yeah, I mean, it on the surface, it seemed like it's kind of a burden for one candidate and a boon for the other. But really what I was looking for in an answer was an assertion of leadership. Not this sense that I'm a spectator and I'm watching what's happening, but, you know, we're sending people to represent us who can exercise some leadership. I really wanted to hear if I were in that situation, here's what I would do. But I didn't really hear that from either person.
I'm curious about both of the candidates' challenges as you all see them, especially after the debate. As the incumbent, of course, Ron Estes has the advantage of being a little bit more of a known quantity. But how would you all frame the challenges that he is facing versus those that Laura Lombard is looking at right now?
I think her challenges are much larger than his. For one, she's a relatively new candidate. She did run in the 2018 Democratic primary, but this is only really, I think, her second run for elected office. So she's not very well known. I'm just for me, my mailbox, when I go to my mailbox every day, I get, at least one or two Roger Marshall, Barbara Bollier postcards. I've gotten 0 Laura Lombard postcards introducing herself. And for that, no Ron Estes either. I did notice a Ron Estes commercial tonight. So I think she has a much bigger hill to climb. He won almost 60% of the vote in 2018 in his last election. That's a pretty good number. And to me his only issue is if Trump does something between now and election, which is always possible, that somehow really turns people off, and then they carry that anger down the ballot to him.
Yeah, I think to Tom's point, it comes down to money. This is such a different race compared to Marshall Bollier, where obviously the Democratic Party is putting a lot of money behind that race as well. And in this case, because I think I'm sure internal polling shows the same thing. I haven't seen recent polls on this, but we're just now seeing Congressman Estes. Tom said he saw an ad. I just saw my first Ron Estes ad here this week. So he has kept his head down compared to some of the other candidates who are in these closer races.
Yeah, I wouldn't have anything to add much to what these two said. I would agree. I mean, I think the best thing for Estes to do is to just maintain a sense that he's in the race and maybe say as little as possible.
Did you all feel like the values that each candidate holds maybe became a little clearer or crystallized from the debate, or did they pretty well stick by their value stances?
I saw that in the public mask requirement question. I kind of liked what Estes said, although I did wonder about his assertion that the pandemic had been handled very well. Not that part, but the part where he was not in favor of a federal mandate. One of the things that people say about Kansas is that you don't want to get caught trying to lead here, and that it's difficult to lead Kansans, but that they'll follow. And I think the real answer to that question, again, to me was, can you assert the kind of leadership where people will want to wear masks as opposed to commanding them to wear masks? That's something very deep in who we are as Kansans. You're not going to tell us what to do. We'll decide for ourselves whether we're going to do it or not.
It's kind of the American spirit turned up to high. Well, that sounds to me. Tom, were you going to say something?
No, I agree with Mark that nothing from their comments today made me kind of go, whoa, that's really kind of a different spin. I mean, I think they both kind of hewed their party lines for the most part. I was a little surprised, not a little bit surprised that Laura Lombard was not in favor of a vaccine, a mandated vaccine for people, which I know would almost be impossible, but she was in charge. She was in favor for schools, which I thought was interesting, for school children, but not for companies or businesses, which I thought was interesting. But nothing really that either of them said kind of was, to me, out of the mainstream, what you would expect from a Democrat or Republican.
Laura Lombard did mention very briefly universal health care. And if there's one thing I wish we could have drilled down on, because there is a question on how to pay for something like that. And it was made a very brief comment that we really didn't get to drill down on healthcare plans especially since she had mentioned universal.
She's also a big advocate of universal pre-K, which is interesting. She has a young child, as she mentioned in the debate, and an advocate for universal pre-K for everybody, which I think has been become more popular in the last couple, 3 years. But again, it's a question of how do you pay for that? Who's going to pay for that? State of Kansas doesn't have the money to pay for that. So where do you get it from?
Yeah, I agree with Michael about wishing we could have spent more time on the healthcare question, particularly when we had the president hospitalized over the weekend, 10 to 12 doctors, specialists available around the clock, experimental medicine, helicopter rides to and from Walter Reed.
A limo ride.
Yeah, a limo ride. I mean, the average American can't afford to get sick. I mean, the average person has to go undefeated when it comes to this virus and anything else.
Yeah. I have a question from Forrest from Facebook, who says, how do you think both did regarding international trade?
I mean, that would be her strong suit. Her professional career was in trade, international trade. She's worked for companies and started a company that deal in international trade. So I would think that would be her thing. None of them said anything that surprised me. Ron Estes talked about standing up to China and being tough on China, that'll pay dividends, which I think has pretty much been their line. And I think that, the Democrats have been talking about trying to open up more markets and not making our trading partners angry, so they close markets. So that would be her one area of strength.
I would agree with that. I think there's a through line between that and the marijuana question that was asked. With this being an agricultural state, if we could embrace this idea, it could produce a lot of benefits for us economically.
Mark, on the marijuana question, did it surprise you at all on Congressman Estes's response because it seemed to be more open than what we've heard in the past from maybe most Republicans? It seems to be opening the door with the line that he gave tonight.
Well, it seemed closed at first, and then as he continued to answer, the door kind of cracked open. That did surprise me, frankly. And I think there are a lot of financial benefits, business benefits to exploring it. If you talk to people at the Farm Bureau, they've been interested in this for quite a while.
Well, to me, it's a little bit like the lottery. None of you guys are old enough to remember when the lottery first started, but when states started their lotteries, when I think I was in high school, people were like, oh my God, the lottery, it's gambling, it's terrible. And Michigan started, and Michigan made a ton of money on it. And other states said, we ought to try that. Well, and now everyone has a lottery, I think. And I think the momentum, as you point out in your question, Michael, is that the momentum is to legalize marijuana. And more people, Oklahoma has, for God's sakes, more and more people are jumping on that bandwagon. I think maybe his answer was a recognition of that fact.
What I wrote down just a note, because he said, we're keeping an eye on the tax revenue side of it.
Mm-hmm. If the government can tax it, they're always interested in it. Right. Yeah.
I'm Sarah Jane Crespo, and this is a special edition of Digital Democracy on Tap. We're talking about the District 4 Congressional Debate with Tom Shine of KMUW, Michael Schwanke of KWCH Channel 12, and Mark McCormick, formerly of the Wichita Eagle, currently with the ACLU of Kansas. And we want you to join the conversation too. We'll try to get to all of your questions before the end of the half hour. You guys, how did this compare to other district debates in your opinion?
Talking about congressional debates.
Yeah.
The only ones that come to mind for me is we did a couple in 2018, Michael and I did, and the first district, when Roger Marshall was just a huge prohibitive favorite, it was interesting. I thought this one, to me, it's a win for Laura Lombard just because she got to be out in front of people. It's so hard to get out in front of people in the COVID today. And I'm thinking her funds are probably somewhat limited. So the ability to get on and do a 30-minute, radio and TV show was a huge thing for her. And I think she did fine. I think she was very good, well-spoken, prepared. Didn't say anything that shocked anybody. But I thought this was good for her, and I think the overall thing is good for voters. I mean, if you don't know much about Laura Lombard or Ron Estes, presumably you know more about him now.
Yeah, you can split the difference. I guess they did tonight. I don't think Estes did anything to hurt himself, and I agree with Tom that Lombard kind of helped herself.
Yeah, I think in these, to Mark's point, they have to be very careful. Someone like Ron Estes, because they can. I think oftentimes when it's a battle like this, they can only hurt themselves. And I agree. I didn't see anything that happened. And again, the whole idea is to give voters the opportunity to hear from that side that does not have a lot in the bank for these campaigns, and it's just a way for them to get out in front of people.
Sarah, you asked about things that surprised me, and frankly, I was surprised by Estes's response to the question about Breonna Taylor and law enforcement. His characterization of the George Floyd death was interesting. I was also interested in his answer about body cams. I don't really think body cams are the issue. I think public access to that footage is the real issue. But I was interested in his characterization. I wondered how it landed on the two of you, Tom and Michael.
I mean, I thought he was smart about it. And I think, he pointed out about legislation about paying for more training, paying for more body cameras. And I totally agree with you that if they take pictures and no one sees the pictures, what good have they done? But I think he was much more sensitive about it than some leaders of his party have been. And I thought it showed an understanding of how that has hurt people. And I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah,
I agree. I don't have much to add. You know what? I think one thing that really stands out on this, compared to some other forums or debates we've done, really you never saw these candidates attack one another. And I think we will see that obviously when we have Marshall and Bollier here. But these candidates, I'm trying to think of even a moment where they said, my opponent does X, or called each other by name, or even acknowledged each other through the forum. They just were basically giving their platform, but never really called each other out like we've seen in some other forums.
That's a really good point, Michael. I just, I noticed in a lot of his answers, Estes kept talking about things that he was doing on a bipartisan basis. And what I've been wanting to hear from candidates on both sides is this sense that they can govern the entirety of the people who live in their districts, not just serve the ones who are ours or just serve the ones who are these, but could serve both. I noticed a through line in his answers about, well, I did this on a bipartisan basis. I did this with this Democrat. That was refreshing to hear.
There's not a news release that you get from a candidate today or a sitting legislator, Jerry Moran, Ron Estes, and that if it's a bipartisanship effort, that's in the first sentence. Bipartisan bill, bipartisan work, and I think that's important. I agree, and I thought that was a good answer. I did laugh though that you talked about them not attacking each other, which was great. She went after Trump a little bit, which is fine. And then he went after Hillary. It's like the ghost of Hillary has arisen.
Did you even hear Estes go after the Democratic Party much? I mean, did he even, like we've heard in some of these other?
At the very, very end, when he talked about Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton. It's 4 years ago. Let's move on.
How does a local or statewide debate like this compare to the national stage, whether in like the importance of this kind of thing or in what it has to get done for people to be effective?
Well, first of all, I'm just glad I'm not Chris Wallace in that situation. They behave very well. No one goes over time on these. You know, I think these are, and I think they know it, these are local and they're speaking to Kansans. Both candidates know Kansans. They know they don't want to hear a bunch of yelling and screaming. And that's just not Kansas. And I think that's what we see here as they talk locally.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. I think they behave themselves. They know who their audience is. To them, it's a great opportunity because this was carried out, you know, not just, you know, in Wichita, but I assume, Michael, it was carried on some of your other affiliates as well in the state or in our district anyway. Great opportunity. They're not going to have a lot of opportunities to do this. There's not a lot of debates scheduled that I'm aware of anyway. So you don't want to come in here and just, you know, make a mess of everything. And it's a chance for you to talk about your platform. It was a forum, so that probably lent to the less back and forth and backbiting, because they just answered questions. They didn't, you know, attack the other person's answer, which I think is fine. I think people want to hear what they have to say and not see them try to score points in some way in a debate, because, you know, you saw the Trump-Biden one and that, you know, it didn't go well. So I think it's a good opportunity. And I think these are very important. I think these are highly important. I think people we send to Congress, I think the people we send to the county commission, to the state legislature, have much more impact on our lives, certainly as much as do the federal level, you know, the president and people like that. And those races to me are more important. I mean, it's the county commission who voted in the mask mandate and all those laws. So that affects us directly. So I think that's very important. So I think these are important to do too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with my old boss. You know, people feel like they understand who we are as Kansans, but I don't think Kansas gets the credit that it deserves as a kind of social fault line. And I'm talking historically, and I'm talking right up to present day. The first state, you know, to pass temperance laws. The first place where the first successful student-led sit-in was here in Kansas, all the way up to the Summer of Mercy. Our state is a social fault line. It's a bellwether in a lot of ways. And, you know, we have had 2 Democratic governors who were women. That really doesn't fit the Kansas profile that I think people elsewhere would attach to us. And I think with a lot of Senate seats at play, this race is going to get a lot more attention than it has gotten in the past.
We are running short on time here. If you all would give me just kind of your key takeaways and anything that voters, in your opinion, should kind of have in mind between now and November 3rd with regard to this race in particular, and we'll conclude with that.
My takeaways, I finally got to hear Laura Lombard speak, and she was very good. I thought she was very, very on point and very polished. And again, the opening statements were a little rough for both, but was very good. So I got to know where she stood on stuff. I had a much better, clear understanding of where she's coming from. With Ron Estes, I was surprised by some of his empathy, which the Republicans don't get a lot of credit for sometimes. I thought he was good. I thought his work about, you talk about, Mark, about not being on the sidelines. So he's tried to do something on aviation jobs, trying to get legislation passed with folks, I think, from the state of Washington to do that. So he's sort of in the game there, trying to get jobs passed. So I thought he was good too. He's done nothing, in his 4 years or so, or 3.5 years to anger people or make people think he's unworthy. And I think his performance tonight kind of, played on that. So the only thing I would tell people is, voter registration is Tuesday. So if you're not registered, you have until Tuesday, and then vote. It's not that hard.
Since we're at Michael's house, I think Michael should have the last word, so I'll go now. But the one thing I would want people to leave with is the discussion about healthcare. This was something that Michael said earlier. we're in the middle of a pandemic, a historic pandemic. Healthcare, in my estimation, is more important now, perhaps, than ever before. And the candidates' answers on that question should resound with voters. So I'll just leave it at that.
Michael?
Thanks, Mark. I'll just leave with this. I think we saw a lot about this race by what we saw tonight, and that is Congressman Estes did not have to go on the attack. As Tom mentioned, you know, his term so far, he's ruffled no feathers. He just has to maintain the status quo. That's what we saw tonight. Our idea is to make sure all the voices are heard in these. And Laura Lombard is a candidate who does not have a lot in the bank to win this campaign. So, you know, and the message to voters is sometimes we hear a lot that you only hear sound bites, and, you know, we only hear bits and pieces from what the media shows us. It has never been easier than right now to go and do your own research and listen to those candidates. They have videos and they're doing town halls, even in this virtual world, that you can go out and do some of your research. We scraped the surface tonight in 30 minutes. And, you know, if you want to know more about these candidates, dig in just a little bit, because it is very easy now. And go vote. And thank you for having me.
Well, thank you to all of you on our panel for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. And to all of you, I hope you've enjoyed our program. It was sponsored by Susan and Leon Moeder of Moeder Associates. We'll be back for another breakdown after the statewide senatorial debate with Barbara Bollier and Roger Marshall on October 22nd. Please join us next time. And until then, check out engageict.org for past videos, podcasts, and more. I'm Sarah Jane Crespo. Thanks for joining me for Digital Democracy on Tap, and good night.